Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and as promised, a little peek, a little preview into the Steelers' second preseason game, less than a week after the loss to the Detroit Lions. And of course, as I said, wins, losses, score in the preseason doesn't matter. We're getting to see a mix of different players playing on the field together, especially young guys who are mostly underdogs and long shots to make this team. And if they do, they will mostly play in a special teams capacity or at least a practice team role. And that's what we're really focused on today. I have several questions to see, what's going to happen here against the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday? The Steelers playing at Heinz Field for a second consecutive week to open up the 2016 preseason. Hopefully the home field fans turn out once again. About 40,000 people did show up. And I know as this preseason goes on and you get disappointed because you know that players like Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, D'Angelo Williams, Ben Roethlisberger, they are not going to be playing in this game. More than likely, one of the rookies we did want to see, maybe a question mark for Thursday night, cornerback Artie Burns, the first-round pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 2016 NFL Draft. He has been hampered a little bit by the injury bug, has been eased back into practice. Don't know if he's going to see much time at all. He may or may not. They may put him out there for a few plays just to test him, see how he's feeling. But after all, talking with Mark Ullman, a.k.a. Steel Dad, last week before the Detroit Lions game, which we broke down everything we wanted to see and all the players we were excited to see, which still holds a lot of value. If you want to re-listen to that, even for the Lions game, it does apply for this Eagles game. We're still excited to see a lot of these players, but we thought last week Sean Davis icing his leg, coming out of practice a little early, wasn't going to play, and he saw a significant amount of time, and maybe not the best time. Maybe the injury was in the back of his head during that game. He had missed some tackles and then made some great plays, so it was up and down. Mike Tomlin very happy about his ability, his athleticism, and also he was talking about his speed and just how fast and prepared this second-round pick, Sean Davis, out of Maryland, is to play on this team. He got moved all over the field, and I thought it was a really good showing for Sean Davis, so we could possibly see Artie Burns out there against the Eagles. I'm not necessarily going to 100% rule this kid out of the game, but once again, I would not be surprised if he was a scratch to play. So one player that will be playing in this game is Maurkice Pouncey, who is one of the players that I had questions about, because with Pouncey, I'm just concerned the guy's been hurt. It's not necessarily been his fault that he's lost a few seasons in his career, but how many snaps do you want Pouncey to play? Will he play the first series? Will he play a second series? Hopefully he doesn't get rolled on by his own teammate like what happened with, I believe that was David DeCastro in 2013 in the opening game of that season. Friendly fire cost him to miss the entire season. And then last year, we were hoping for Pouncey to return about mid-year after getting hurt in this same second week of the preseason against the Green Bay Packers when his ankle was rolled up on. And Le'Veon Bell was out there running towards, actually around the sidelines. Pouncey had come out, pulled, and was blocking and got kind of tangled up in that block, hurt his ankle, and had several surgeries during the regular season, had complications with those, and never did return. So I guess the main question is with Maurkice Pouncey, is he the same player as he was prior? I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't be, but you just never know. You never know how players are going to recover from these injuries, especially as they age and these things are in the back of their head. He's had bad luck several times in his career so far, as I had already mentioned. How many snaps do you want him to play? And the biggest question is, can he leave the game healthy? I hope that there are no more major injuries to any Pittsburgh Steelers. This team has already had enough enough of the black cloud hanging over their head. You got James Harrison with this Al Jazeera crap that's going on. He's playing games. Essentially, he's taunting James Harrison is taunting Roger Goodell. We know from years ago, these two, just the history and James having the Sports Illustrated interview, I believe it was, where he says he wouldn't urinate on Goodell if he was on fire. We know what the two think of each other, and I think that just makes Harrison a target. We still haven't heard anything about Le'Veon Bell, and this was supposed to be resolved, I believe they said, by the 18th. I may have that date wrong, but the 18th is this day for the preseason game. Are we going to get some news? This is really the way I feel. If the NFL really has it out for the Steelers, and of course the Steelers, the only team who didn't ratify this new collective bargaining agreement to begin with, and then many of the things that have happened over the years with the suspensions to the players, James Harrison, Ben Roethlisberger, the whole Le'Veon Bell situation before and even now, Martavis Bryant, all these various things were going on, even Ryan Clark getting fined in the past and things of that nature that just seemed like complete crap. It'll really confirm my suspicion that maybe Goodell in the league's office has something out for the Steelers, or as perhaps this was suggested over by the guys at Steel City Blitz, that Goodell is just a puppet for the other league owners. And it wouldn't be a surprise if the other league owners did not like the Steelers, especially the Steelers, of course, not playing ball and just going with the flow with that collective bargaining agreement. The Steelers kind of come up with their own innovations, as been discussed on our website in various articles and with Ron Lippick of the Pittsburgh Sports Daily Bulletin. If you check some of that out, the Steelers really are trendsetters. I talked about some of this the previous week on the show. It wouldn't surprise me at all if some of these owners just have a disdain for the Steelers for all of these various reasons, the Rooney Rule and everything, concussion protocols and various things. So the one thing that will confirm my suspicion is if they wait, if it is the 18th and it is the very same game day with the Eagles, and they wait until several hours before this game kicks off to make some type of announcement, as to me would be a very deliberate action that's just meant to undermine this franchise. So with all this off the field stuff, we don't need any more players getting hurt on the field, such as like a Senquez Golson or even Bruce Gradkowski getting injured in the last game with a hamstring. So just trying to keep everyone healthy. Steelers are far from the only team in this league dealing with injuries or who have dealt with injuries in past preseason. So I wish all of the boys on the field on both sides of the ball the best of luck. I never say anything like the old stage cliche of go break a leg. I want everyone to be able to walk out of there in one piece feeling like $1 million. So one of the guys I would hope would feel like $1 million on Thursday night is going to be Sammie Coates. Sammie Coates he had the spotlight shine on him for the first preseason game. The end of that first half was supposed to be the Sammie Coates show. And every time he got his hands on the ball, and even the one catch or so that he did have, he bobbled one, and then he had the other fumble, and then he had a fumble later on. Just kind of a nightmare performance coming from a man we expect to maybe be the fill-in for Martavis Bryant, perhaps even exceed the expectations that Bryant has already laid there. Can Sammie hold up to the billing from all intents and purposes? Everything that was said at training camp says, yes, Sammie Coates is the guy. He comes out in this game, disappoints. I'm actually happy that happened, not in some sadistic type of way, but I'm a firm believer that we learn by failure, and failing in a preseason game is much better than failing in a regular season game. And if you learn and correct everything from the mistakes that you have made. It's only going to make you a stronger and better player. We haven't seen a whole lot of Sammie prior to this, nor had we seen a whole lot of Doran Grant for that matter as well. So both of these players, you had Doran Grant come out and have a very eye-opening game. Of course, the pick six will open anyone's eyes, nearly with the fumble recovery and whatnot. Looks like he's finally getting some playing time too. So these young men that are getting opportunities, going to have to make the most of them. And I think being at home at Heinz for Sammie Coates, this is a good way to rebound, show the home team crowd what you're made of, and I think maybe the Steelers will get him involved early. All depends on the mix of players that are going to be out there. Of course, AB won't be playing, but Marcus Wheaton, who was a scratch from the Lions game, may be back out there for the Eagles game. We'll see. More than likely some limited reps. Darius Hayward-Bay was playing on the one outside spot, so we'll see exactly how Sammie fits into all of this. Eli Rogers was also in that rotation early as the slot receiver. It's kind of interesting to see maybe what the coaching staff thinks of all this, but I would like to get Sammie involved early, give him some nice, easy catches to make, some nice, easy passes for Landry Jones as well, who I think he'll definitely be starting tomorrow night, even though they hadn't necessarily announced that. We'll be getting to that here in a second, but back to Doran Grant, and what did the Steelers do about their secondary? I'm sure you heard the news over the week. Doran Grant was working out at the safety position, and this is just after he had a what I thought was a great showing as a corner. And I think this was pre-planned, and part of the reason that this happened is the Steelers they're weak at safety. Sean Davis, who can play either position in the defensive backfield and did in last Friday's game, if he has to end up playing the spot that Senquez Golson was maybe penciled in for, and you don't have Artie Burns out there, you're going to need somebody to slide over and maybe play safety. And we already know we have Will Gay. We know we have Ross Cockrell. More than likely, Artie Burns is going to be in this mix too. So where does that necessarily leave Doran Grant? Well, he may actually receive some significant playing time if he comes in a backup role as a safety. There was also some question too. I think it was Ed Bouchette who was talking about maybe Grant doesn't have the speed required to play corner in this league. But I think it goes a little more to what we're always talking about, versatility. I think the Steelers need to see if they need to bring someone else in. Somebody that we've mentioned many times is Will Allen, who's still sitting out there in free agency. He's not maybe garnering a whole lot of attention, or maybe he's got maybe a handshake side agreement just waiting for his phone to ring, much like what happened with bringing back Brett Kiesel a few years ago in the middle of the preseason, as well as James Harrison, who came in when the Steelers had a lack of depth when Jarvis Jones got hurt. So in much the same situation, I think this was a deliberate move by the Steelers to see what they have on their roster right now, and if they have to make any type of move. Would not surprise me at all to see Grant play a lot against the Eagles and play in multiple positions like we saw Sean Davis play earlier. We've seen Robert Golden do much of the same as well. I just think maybe this team feels finally that Shamarko Thomas is not the answer. And also Ross Ventrone getting hurt, originally reportedly placed on injured reserve. I believe he was released with an injury settlement instead. So no longer do you have Ventrone as an option, and also a veteran guy. Not that I thought Ventrone was really going to – if they thought Ventrone was a guy that could play there, he would have been playing in that position already instead of the 42 or 40, now 43, I think, transactions that he's had in his 5 or 6 year NFL career, constantly released, re-signed between an active roster and practice squad, between the New England Patriots, his original team, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if Ventrone was that guy, I still don't think – I think the Steelers still needed to know what was going on with Grant, and this is something they wanted to do before closing camp. Get him some reps in, get him into this game number 2, and see what they have. Otherwise, they may break the glass, pick up that phone in case of emergency, and call Will Allen in, which isn't necessarily the worst deal. I know a lot of people think, hey, why would we go – we should be focusing on the younger guys. Well, yes, we should focus on the development of some of the younger players, but a trusty veteran, a guy who has a plethora of starting experience. He even had 4 sacks last year. He hasn't really lost too much of a step. I don't want to see Will Allen as a starting safety, but I wouldn't mind if he were there on the depth chart just in case. And, of course, Will Allen's another guy that's versatile that could maybe play in the slot. I even think I saw him playing on the outside, too, as well last season, where they had a lot of these 3 safety looks towards the end of the year. So I think Grant's spot, unless he tremendously screws up, even if Will Allen were to return, I think Grant still has a spot on this team. We just need to see exactly where that spot is and where he may fit in. Maybe more playing time for this young man if he can excel at the safety position, because even though our cornerback situation isn't necessarily great, I think it's at least okay or above average, and Grant would probably be in a logjam for playtime consideration at that position during the regular season. So one of the other questions I know on the defense is Travis Feeney's another guy who's been banged up, the 6th-round pick from Washington. He is a linebacker. He's from a 4-3 system. A lot of people question where and how does he exactly fit in. Travis Feeney may fit in a lot like a Ryan Shazier piece that you move around on the field, or I don't know. A lot of people talked about like this hybrid safety type thing. They've always talked about Shazier playing safety, which I think was a little crazy. But Travis Feeney may fit this bill as well, and especially so the special teams that I say these guys have to earn their keep playing special teams. I'm excited to see if Feeney can get out there on the field. He was battling some injuries, also did not play last Friday against the Lions. So this is a guy that I want to see out there. I want to see exactly what he does. If he gets some reps with the defense, get some reps with special teams, it could certainly use the special teams help, because let me tell you, as much as we talk about the defensive depth being a problem, that also translate to the special teams, because the guys who aren't playing at linebacker or defensive line or safety or corner or whatever else, you'll see that these guys are playing special teams. They are the special team starters, and the Steelers certainly have had their trouble in that department over the years. But one part of that department I don't think that they're going to have trouble with is Jordan Berry and the punting position. I have been singing Jordan Berry's praises now for quite some time. I even wanted to, I don't know if people would get excited if I put a video highlight thing of Jordan Berry up or not. Punts aren't necessarily the sexiest things, but like I said, punters are people too. And we're going to be coming up on the first round of roster cuts here shortly. I don't have the date in front of me, but I think it's just shortly after or before this third preseason game maybe. And you're going to have to cut 15 people off the 90-man roster and trim it to 75, which really puts Will Monday, the second punter in camp, the second punter on this roster, his job in jeopardy, I think, because if Jordan Berry has another showing like this, Will Monday would have to have the Jordan Berry game against the Lions in order to maybe have any consideration of maybe making it past this first round of cuts. So basically the question being asked is, does Jordan Berry win the punting job this Thursday? And I do think he does. So the Steelers just have a number of linebackers and even a handful of wide receivers that they got to consider. Are these guys going to be, and the guys in the secondary too, although they're dropping like flies, they have to decide who's going to eventually be on the 53-man roster, who's going to be a practice squad guy, and who's completely out. I mean, that's just crazy to think about. If you pause for a second and think they go from 90 to 53. I mean, well, I'm not going to say it's almost half, but it's definitely a third of the roster or better that just vanishes. What is that? 37 players that just go bye-bye that are currently out there. And I'd even made a comment at the game the other night. It's just funny seeing it almost like a college game where you have so many people standing on the sidelines. You're just not accustomed to seeing 90 men out there like you would for maybe a college football game when Pitt's playing at Heinz Field or anywhere else that you may go. So that's just, there's going to be all these guys that just fall off the face of the planet. And I don't know. The Steelers are already been making roster moves. They got rid of the one long snapper, defensive lineman. They got rid of the center, Mahalik, who I think got a little banged up in that Lions game. So they were already making moves, and those young men that have already just joined the team late in camp here and getting very few practices in, they will probably be casualties as part of that 15 as well, unless someone really turns heads. I don't know. So as far as we've talked about Grant, we talked about Coates, we talked about Pouncey, we talked about Feeney, we talked even about the punter. So what about the quarterback situation that's going on here? I know just people, I think people may even just be annoyed with me over the last week because originally, and I was gonna add to the piece that Eric Herman did on Landry Jones over at SteelCityUnderground.com, but I felt it had legs on its own, put it out there. Could Landry Jones, is he good enough to be the starting, or not the starting quarterback? Obviously not, and I'm with you guys for the most part. If in a pinch, maybe. We saw in a pinch last year, not exactly terrible, great, maybe not great. Ben Roethlisberger, definitely not. But then again, who is? Your Peyton Mannings of the world, your Ben Roethlisbergers, even, dare I say, Tom Brady. I won't give Joe Flacco or Andy Dalton the same type of respect, but these other guys are upper echelon players among the best of the game, and they're going to have a bust in Canton someday. So how can we ever expect Landry Jones to be anything more than a backup? At least, hopefully, he's serviceable, because you know what? A lot of people give him a lot of hate. And Charlie Batch is a beloved figure in Pittsburgh, and for many, many, many reasons. But his quarterback play, he was 6-6 as a Pittsburgh Steeler. I mean, what else can you say about that? So Charlie Batch gets loved, Landry Jones gets hated, and now you're without Bruce Gradkowski, who's sidelined with a sizable hamstring tear. My quote fingers are up in the air. That's the exact report that was coming out. Don't know. This could cost Bruce his whole season yet again, and probably his NFL career if that is the case, because if you can't stay healthy, this is the what have you done for me lately league, which is kind of where people were with Landry Jones. I beat that dead horse on the last podcast breaking down the Lions game. If you want to listen to that, I'm not going to throw Landry under the bus. I think how much do you play Landry in this Eagles game? Because you don't want to lose another guy who has years in this system getting hurt by leaving him out there. But then again, this guy doesn't play a whole lot, and he certainly benefited from the amount of snaps and the amount of reps he took with the offense during last year's preseason, which the Steelers even had that extra game with the Hall of Fame game. So what do you do with Landry Jones? Do you let him play an entire half? I think you want him to get a little bit of rapport if guys like Marcus Wheaton are out there playing. Of course, he won't have that with Lev Bell or D'Angelo Williams, nor do I want to see those guys ever play in the preseason. In fact, I wouldn't be heartbroken if Ben just sits this whole time. But I think what I'm really getting towards is, depending on how serious Gradkowski's injury is whether the Steelers decide on what they do with Dustin Vaughn, who was merely brought in, signed to a futures contract. Now his third team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, so he's his first year with the Steelers, but he was still eligible, I believe, for like the rookie minicamp. They had to have like a guy that could throw passes there. You need a quarterback, and you need an extra body to do some of these drills and whatnot. So Dustin was a guy that I didn't feel like many guys before him that were in this same role, such as like Taj Boyd last year, would ever have an opportunity to see any playing time in the preseason. But Bruce getting hurt opened up the door for Dustin to come out. He didn't do exactly terrible. He went 6 of 11 for 50 yards. That's okay. It's okay. He's playing with a lot of guys he's never played with. He hasn't been around for a very long time. I don't expect perfection, but here's a guy that has been in camps. He was with the Cowboys, and I can't remember the other team off the top of my head that he was with last season in their camps. So he's used to this drill, and he kind of knows where his role is. But Mike Tomlin said we're going to see what we have with Dustin, and the team is still monitoring, just like they have with Senquez Golson. They haven't made any major move, any major announcement. They haven't brought in another player to replace Senquez. They haven't brought in another guy to replace Bruce, nor have they really announced that Bruce is going on injured reserve, which would cost him the year. I think they want to see the medical opinions. Officially, they have some roster cuts and moves that they have to make for the 75. There's a lot of business, a lot of off-field football business that has to be done. You have to get guys that are going to come in cheap, and you have to see if they're going to fit with your football team. And at this time, I think we're going to see Dustin Vaughn at least for a half against the Eagles, and depending on how Dustin does is whether or not perhaps a drastic move, one that I couldn't believe. I was defending his play the other day on the podcast, and that was Michael Vick. That's the reason why everybody is probably up in arms over everything that we've been putting out over on SCU, because we're talking about Landry Jones and Michael Vick. These guys aren't Ben Roethlisberger, but a lot of you probably still remember like the Bubby Bristers and the Kent Grahams, and that was his name, right? Jeez, I'm pulling out some really old names. Jim Miller. I love Jim Miller. I caught a preseason replay the other day of the Bears game. I didn't realize he was the color guy. I always hear Jim on the NFL radio on Sirius XM radio, and Jim is still proud to have played for Bill Cowher and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Jim, very cool guy. But the players in that sort of vein is what we probably think with like Jones, and I thought Vick was terrible last year. I'll come out and say it. My apologies to Michael Vick, though. I thought he handled his business in Pittsburgh very well for all the things that were thrown in his direction. And I just think one of the things is like his age, and there wasn't a need to bring Michael Vick back and re-sign him for this season when you have Landry Jones, and then they wanted Bruce Gradkowski, who is younger than Vick and maybe fits their system a little better and has been around a little bit longer. And I can't say that Gradkowski has had any type of success. He's thrown like 3 or 5 regular season or even the postseason passes. I think he had 3 or 4 attempts against the Baltimore Ravens when Ben got dinged up near the end of that game. So someone tried to say, I hate even bringing this up on the show. There was a comment on the whole Michael Vick thing, and they brought race into it, and they said, well, people don't want to, they're using the whole thing that happened with Vick. The whole dog fighting thing that came up, and whatever your opinions are on it, fine. If you want to let it go, if you felt he's done his time for his crime and he's truly sorry about it, that's kind of where I'm coming from. You got to kind of people are trying to do their penance, okay? And I don't know how much longer you hold it over his head, but somebody tried to bring race into this, and I just said it has nothing to do with him being a black quarterback and the Steelers and their fans not wanting a black quarterback. I just talked about Charlie Batch being one of the most loved guys in Pittsburgh. They still love him. He's still on the radio. People call in. Everyone loves Charlie. I just think that some people are really, they're huge animal lovers. If something happens to a puppy, they're ready to fight over it, and that's understandable too. I could see both sides of the situation, but putting all of that aside, there was a lot of ugly things said about Landry Jones. There's a lot of ugly things being said about Michael Vick. Both of those things coming out from our site, and I'm seeing all the comments on social media and even physically on those articles, and I'm just shaking my head like, wow, I can't believe some of this. Listen, if Michael Vick is an option, we're going to find out soon, because Dustin Vaughn's going to play Thursday. I don't think Landry Jones plays the entire game, because if Landry Jones does get hurt, guess what? Michael Vick is going to be the best option, because at least he's been in this system. This is a very complicated offense that Todd Haley has with terminology that doesn't necessarily cross over from other systems players have played in. And I think that's part of the reasoning the Steelers are taking a wait-and-see approach. They're taking a wait-and-see with the secondary, whether they need somebody like Will Allen, what's the time frame for Senquez Golson coming back, what's going on with Bruce Gradkowski. You got a lot of irons in the fire right now, and they're still dealing with all this other crap with James Harrison and Le'Veon Bell. So just a little bit of patience here. Try and at least see it from a business perspective. I'm not saying I don't want to see anybody but Ben Roethlisberger under center. I want him there for every snap, all 16 games. And if the Steelers end up going starting the year out like the Carolina Panthers did last year and just winning all of these games, then I wouldn't even mind just giving Ben a breather and letting Landry Jones toss the pigskin around a little bit and get him some real regular season experience, other than let me yank you off the bench here late in the game and get a few warm-up throws in now. We're expected you to make this very accurate throw when we're losing, and there's all these things on the line. There's just so much pressure. That's just the mental aspect of it, let alone the physical. You've been sitting around and aren't warm, aren't loose, and aren't ready. That's a lot to ask of anybody. I think even if you take Peyton Manning off the bench and try to have him do that, even maybe in his prime, be okay. We saw Ben come in for Landry Jones, and somebody will probably mention that against the Browns. Landry gets banged up. Ben was the backup. He comes in, which is such an awkward scenario, but they just wanted to give Ben some more rest, and Ben just lights up the Browns. But, hey, it's Ben Roethlisberger there. It's not going to happen when you have a Landry Jones, a Ryan Nassib, a Dan Orlovsky. Probably one of the few guys that's out there that isn't a starter right now that's halfway decent actually for the Browns is Josh McCown. And I think he might be able to come in there. But Josh McCown has had his own struggles too, even when he went down to Tampa Bay and tried to be the starter. So you just never know how these things are going to go. I think Matt Hasselbeck's still floating around. I think he's like in his early 40s. And I just don't know. I mean, Andrew Luck goes down. What do you expect from a guy like Matt Hasselbeck in his place? And this is the question that all of these teams are trying to answer. The San Francisco 49ers signing Christian Ponder to their team now because Colin Kaepernick is banged up, and Colin Kaepernick was supposed to be the starter before, but now with a change in regimes there, and you had Harbaugh out, and then you had, Thomas something. I can't remember that. I apologize. I don't remember the head coach's name, but now Chip Kelly is there, so they're changing coaches several times over, which is very destructive to a quarterback's career, and head coaching jobs are tied to, guess what? Your starting quarterback. So Mike Tomlin, the one thing a lot of people say when he inherited Bill Cowher's team, he really inherited Bill Cowher's best quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. And since he's hitched his saddle to that and been the Steelers head coach, both have been very successful. But you see what happens in a lot of these franchises and a lot of these teams. They're always changing around. I mean, look what happened. Ryan Tannehill has had how many different head coaches and offensive coordinators there. And even looking across the division here with the Browns and the different quarterbacks they've gone through. And then, of course, with the Baltimore Ravens and seeing how many times they changed offensive coordinators. And what's happened with Joe Flacco there. And he didn't have a very good year last year. And they even had somebody like Matt Schaub, who you would think would be a much more solid backup or alternative should Flacco get hurt, and he did even more miserable. So I don't know. I really don't know, folks. We're going to see how Dustin Vaughn plays here. We're going to see if Dustin Vaughn can run the offense the same way. I think Landry Jones, like I said, he checked out of a few plays last Friday against the Lions. He had that one really good call where he read the defense, and that afforded Darrell Richardson to look good as well. So you got to give credit. This is a team sport. We're going to see if Dustin Vaughn is capable of being the clipboard holder. If not, maybe a veteran presence is necessary. I don't know that another rookie with no camp under their belt is going to be a good option. And then, of course, someone that also, I think me and Eric were talking about whether or not they could just roll with just two quarterbacks and maybe keeps an extra linebacker or something. I don't like that. I don't like playing with fire. But then again, if Dustin Vaughn is a practice squad guy, and Landry Jones for many, many, many years had been that inactive player that never got a helmet, I don't know. Could you keep Dustin Vaughn as maybe a third option, but have him on the practice squad? And I don't know. The Steelers have always rolled with three quarterbacks. When you had a guy that you knew wouldn't get hurt, like Peyton Manning, he only had, I think, Jim Sorge or maybe somebody else backing him up for several years in Indianapolis. They didn't have three quarterbacks on that schedule or on that roster. But when you look at all these games that Ben Roethlisberger has missed over his career, the amount of beating that he's taken, I think the offensive line, of course, Mike Munchak coming in, he has corrected that as of the few years he's been here. But, of course, you got to have the guys. He gets hurt last year, but you don't have Marquise Pouncey. You lose Kelvin Beachum. And when you have injuries there, you're going to suffer injuries maybe at other positions, and that's what happened to Ben. But before that, Haley's system was keeping Ben on his feet. So I know there's a few particular people out there on Twitter that just don't like Todd Haley. They don't like the fact that he has had success and Ben has had more success and Ben has been kept more upright. And that was the thing that happened with Eli Manning in New York too. They bring in Ben McAdoo last year as an offensive coordinator to try and limit, Eli throwing interceptions and Eli getting sacked because he always had defenders in his face. And he had a much more productive year last year, too, coming out of the same draft. Very similar players of similar fashion that maybe don't get the amount of respect they deserve, having won more than one Super Bowl ring, having been to the big game multiple times. It's kind of crazy to talk about. I don't like Eli as obviously I would much rather have Big Ben under there, but we know Big Ben's a big guy and he doesn't mind being a punching bag sometimes. He's tough. He's that blue collar Pittsburgh attitude. He's definitely a yinzer like the rest, and I guess that's why we love him, we defend him, and feel no one else is capable of filling his shoes. But these are the names I want you to take a look at for Thursday's game against the Philadelphia Eagles. If you have any comments or anything else that you guys want to send my way, I'll be doing, you could even call in during the game, leave a message, something that you see. I will play that on the air and answer it. That phone number that you're going to want to call is 203-900-4SCU as an acronym for Steel City Underground. 203-900-4, the number 4, SCU. And just leave a message. It's been a while since I played some of these on the air, so I apologize. Been covering all kinds of stuff and even just trying to fit this show in with the sporadic. I can't wait till we get to an actual when we have maybe one Thursday night game and then we have Sundays and Mondays for football, because these midweek things and these Friday night games, it's screwing up the podcast schedule. So I'll be back on more of a routine. Hopefully get the debrief from this Steelers-Eagles game to you on Friday morning or Friday afternoon at the very latest. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to call in. And until next time, as always, I encourage you to be safe, be good, and I will catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.